Mercedes just brought an upgrade to Austria that no rival can copy. Not Ferrari. Not Red Bull. Not McLaren. And the reason is not because it is faster, bigger, or more expensive. It is because this upgrade was built from failure. 2 races. 3 weekends. One hidden weakness inside the Mercedes machine. A weakness that already cost Kimi Antonelli a race, handed Ferrari momentum, and gave the entire grid one dangerous thought. Mercedes can brake. But here is where everything changes. While Ferrari is using its new engine opportunity to chase more performance, and Red Bull is fighting the federation over why its engine was named the benchmark, Mercedes has quietly gone in a completely different direction. They are not trying to find speed. They are trying to remove fear. And if this Austrian fix works, the rest of the field may have just lost the only crack they had left. Because a fast Mercedes is difficult to beat. A fast Mercedes that cannot be trusted is vulnerable. But a fast Mercedes that stops braking, that is a championship nightmare. And the most important part is this. The secret is not what Mercedes added. It is what they may have finally stopped from happening. The first thing to understand is that Mercedes did not arrive in Austria as a team looking for a miracle. They arrived as a team trying to protect something they already had. That is what makes this story so dangerous for everyone else. Because most upgrades in Formula 1 are easy to understand from the outside. A team is too slow, so it brings new parts. A car is weak in corners, so the floor changes. A driver is losing time on the straights, so the power unit becomes the focus. But Mercedes' Austrian upgrade does not fit that simple story. Mercedes was not slow. That is the problem. They were winning. They were controlling races. They had the kind of package that makes rivals stop asking, "How do we beat them this weekend?" and start asking, "When will they finally make a mistake?" And then, suddenly, the mistake was not human. It was mechanical. The machine started to betray them. That single idea changes everything. Because a driver can recover from a bad qualifying lap. A strategy department can learn from a wrong tire call. A team principal can explain a poor weekend and move forward. But when the weakness is buried inside the car, when it appears without warning, when it can turn a race-winning machine into a silent, powerless object on the side of the circuit, the entire championship begins to feel different. That is exactly why Austria became more than just another race weekend. It became a test of trust. Not speed. Trust. Can Kimi Antonelli believe the car will be there at the end? Can George Russell push without wondering whether the same invisible problem is waiting for him? Can Mercedes run its package with confidence, or does every decision now carry the shadow of what happened before? Because once a team starts protecting itself from failure, rivals can smell it. Ferrari can smell it. Red Bull can smell it. McLaren can smell it. And that is where the story becomes uncomfortable for Mercedes. The rest of the grid does not need Mercedes to become slow. They only need Mercedes to become uncertain. Uncertainty changes the way a team races. It changes when engineers turn things down. It changes how aggressively drivers attack curbs. It changes whether a strategist chooses the fastest plan or the safest plan. It changes how calm the garage feels when temperatures rise, when traffic builds, when the car is pushed lap after lap at the limit. And in Formula 1, that tiny bit of hesitation can be enough. Because the difference between control and collapse is often invisible until it is too late. That is why the Austrian upgrade matters so much. It was not designed to create a headline number. It was not presented as a dramatic performance weapon. It was described as a newer specification with updates to improve durability and reliability. That sounds simple. Almost too simple. But in the middle of a championship fight, reliability is not a small word. Reliability is the difference between leading and losing. Reliability is the difference between a dominant season and a season that slips away through problems nobody outside the team can see. Reliability is what turns raw speed into points. And points, not theory, decide championships. Here is the part most fans miss. A reliability upgrade can be more frightening than a performance upgrade when the car is already fast. Because if a slow car becomes more reliable, it still might be slow. But if the fastest car becomes more reliable, the rest of the field has a serious problem. Mercedes does not need to reinvent its car. It does not need to find an entirely new concept. It does not need one giant leap that changes the whole competitive order overnight. It needs to stop giving away races. That is the real context behind Austria. Mercedes brought an upgrade that is aimed at keeping its strongest weapon alive. And that weapon is not just the engine. It is the whole system. The power unit, the energy deployment, the chassis, the balance, the confidence of the drivers, and the calm of the team behind them. When all of that works together, Mercedes looks almost impossible to pressure. But when one hidden part starts failing, the whole image cracks. And once that image cracks, every rival suddenly believes again. That is why Barcelona mattered so much. It did not simply give Ferrari a win. It gave Ferrari proof. Proof that Mercedes could be hurt. Proof that the championship leader could lose a race without being overtaken on track. Proof that domination can disappear in one electrical shutdown. And once that proof exists, every future race carries a question. Will it happen again? That question followed Mercedes into Austria. It sat behind every optimistic quote. It sat behind every data screen. It sat behind every lap the team completed. Because when a car has failed recently, no one inside the garage fully relaxes just because it looks quick on Friday. They need distance. They need heat. They need pressure. They need a full race weekend without the same ghost returning. That is why the Red Bull Ring is such a brutal place for this story to unfold. Austria does not give teams much room to hide. The lap is short, sharp, and intense. The car is constantly being asked to brake hard, accelerate hard, climb, recover energy, deploy energy, and do it again almost immediately. If something is fragile, Austria can expose it. If something is marginal, Austria can punish it. And if Mercedes' fix is real, Austria can prove it faster than a more forgiving circuit might. But the twist is that Mercedes did not just need the car to survive. They needed it to survive without losing its edge. Because that is the fear with every reliability fix. Make something stronger, and maybe it becomes heavier. Make something safer, and maybe it becomes less efficient. Open up cooling, and maybe the car becomes less slippery through the air. Protect the power unit, and maybe the drivers lose that sharpness when they need it most. Every solution in Formula One has a cost. Nothing is free. So when Mercedes appeared immediately strong in Austria, that raised the stakes again. Because if the team has improved reliability without damaging performance, then the rest of the grid is not looking at a wounded champion trying to limp through the weekend. They are looking at a champion trying to remove the wound. And that is a completely different threat. This is why the word secret matters. Not because Mercedes rolled a mysterious part into the paddock under a blanket. Not because there is some magical component that photographers failed to capture. The real secret is deeper. It is hidden in the private data only Mercedes has. The failure patterns. The temperatures. The electrical behavior. The internal stress points. The moments where the system came close to the edge before the public ever knew. That information cannot be copied from a photograph. It cannot be cloned from a regulation document. It cannot be guessed just because another team knows Mercedes had problems. Only Mercedes knows exactly what its machine was doing before it failed. And only Mercedes can build a solution around that precise fingerprint. That is why Ferrari's upgrade and Mercedes' upgrade are not the same kind of weapon. Ferrari is trying to gain ground through the development opportunities available to them. Mercedes is trying to lock down the ground it already owns. Ferrari wants to close the gap. Mercedes wants to stop opening the door. And when you look at it like that, Austria becomes the perfect pressure test. Because if Mercedes completes the weekend cleanly, the story changes. The conversation stops being, Mercedes is fast but fragile. It becomes, Mercedes is fast and stable. That is a nightmare sentence for the rest of the field. Because rivals can survive a fragile leader. They can chase a fragile leader. They can pressure a fragile leader into protecting tires, managing temperatures, and fearing the final laps. But a stable leader is different. A stable leader makes every missed opportunity feel expensive. A stable leader makes every small mistake feel fatal. A stable leader turns the championship into a race against time. And that is the danger Austria may reveal. Mercedes might not be bringing the loudest upgrade of the weekend. But they may be bringing the one that changes the most. And now the story moves into the part of the weekend that made the entire paddock uncomfortable. Because while Mercedes was trying to make its own car bulletproof, Formula One was still arguing over something much bigger. The new engine catch-up system. On the surface, it sounds fair. If one manufacturer falls too far behind, the rules give that manufacturer extra chances to improve. Not unlimited freedom. Not a blank check. Just a controlled way to stop one engine supplier from being trapped in a hole for years. That was the idea. But Formula One is never just about the idea. It is about who benefits. It is about who feels punished. It is about who can turn a regulation into an advantage before everyone else even understands what happened. And this is where the Austrian weekend became political. Because the first major assessment of the new system produced a result that shocked almost everyone. Red Bull was named the benchmark for the combustion engine. Not Mercedes. Red Bull. The team that had not been dominating the season was suddenly treated as the team with the best raw engine. And Mercedes, the team that had looked strongest overall, was judged to be behind that benchmark in the specific area the system measures. That sounds impossible at first. If Mercedes has been winning, how can Red Bull have the best engine? But that question is exactly why this story matters. Because the system does not measure the entire car. It does not measure who has the best race pace. It does not measure tire wear, chassis balance, energy deployment, cooling efficiency, driver confidence, or how well every piece works together over a Grand Prix distance. It measures the internal combustion engine, the raw combustion side, the part of the power unit that burns fuel and creates the old-school engine force before the hybrid side adds its own punch. So Red Bull could have the strongest combustion engine, while Mercedes still has the most complete racing weapon. That distinction is small on paper. On track, it is enormous. Because Formula One is not won by one part in isolation. A car is not a drag race engine sitting on a stand. It is a living system. Every piece is connected. The engine, battery, aerodynamics, tires, cooling, braking, and driver all have to work together at the same time. A team can win the battle in one area and still lose the war everywhere else. That is what made the Red Bull ruling so explosive. It created a strange picture. Red Bull was being treated as the benchmark, but it was chasing. Mercedes was dominating, but it still received an extra development opportunity because its combustion engine was judged to be behind Red Bull's. Ferrari, Audi, and Honda were assessed as further away, so they received even more room to develop. And suddenly, nobody was only talking about speed anymore. They were talking about fairness. They were talking about measurement. They were talking about whether the rules were capturing reality or only one narrow slice of it. Red Bull wanted clarification. Mercedes had to respond carefully. Ferrari saw an opening. And the federation was forced to explain how it had reached a conclusion that looked so strange from the outside. But here is the twist. While everyone focused on the political fight, Mercedes quietly found a way to step outside the loudest part of the debate. Because the Austrian specification was not a catch-up performance upgrade. It was a reliability response. That difference is everything. Performance upgrades are regulated, tracked, discussed, and compared. They become part of the public arms race. Teams know who has tokens, who has opportunities, and who is trying to gain power. But reliability fixes live in a different world. A team does not need to ask its rivals for permission to stop its own car from failing. A team does not need to copy another manufacturer's development plan to protect a weakness inside its own system. And Mercedes did not need the catch-up system to justify solving a problem that had already cost it dearly. That is why the upgrade in Austria became so dangerous. It was not fighting the same battle as Ferrari. It was not answering the same question as Red Bull. It was not about proving who had the strongest combustion engine on a chart. It was about preventing the strongest overall package from destroying itself. And that is much harder for rivals to respond to. Ferrari can look at its own power unit and ask where gains might be found. Red Bull can challenge the ranking and ask why it was treated as the benchmark. Honda and Audi can use their development opportunities and search for a step forward. But none of them can look inside the Mercedes failure and copy the solution. They do not have the same data. They do not have the same internal architecture. They do not have the same symptoms. They do not know exactly what happened in the moments before the shutdown. They only know the result. And in Formula One, knowing the result is not the same as knowing the cause. That is where Mercedes' secrecy becomes powerful. The public saw the pain. The public saw the retirement. The public saw the momentum swing. But Mercedes saw the hidden evidence. The temperatures. The electrical signals. The moments of stress. The patterns from previous failures. The warnings that may have appeared before anyone outside the garage understood what was coming. That is the kind of information teams guard with extreme care. Because a visible upgrade can be photographed. A hidden failure map cannot. And if Mercedes has built the Austrian specification around that private map, then the rest of the grid is looking at something they cannot truly reverse engineer. They can copy the lesson. They cannot copy the cure. This is also why the Ferrari comparison matters so much. Ferrari's Austrian update was connected to the broader engine development opportunity. It was a performance step, but not presented as a miracle. Ferrari itself managed expectations carefully. The message was clear. This was an incremental move, not a single update that would transform the entire championship overnight.